Awesome. And at any moment, if we have like some questions that we may not feel, comfortable speaking over the recording and you would prefer us not to record, we can facilitate as well. And then also we want to do some in the chat conversation or more personal. All of our emails and contact information will be shared as well. But we will record so that we can post this to our resource pages so that it can be accessible at your leisure. Okay. All righty. So getting into our grounding and acknowledgement of the land, territories, practices, and cultures of the indigenous peoples, forcibly removed First Nations. Here in our region is the Muskogee Creek people, the enslaved people of the African diaspora, and the countless migrants and immigrants who largely are the laborers in our current agricultural food system. We also want to uplift all people of the global majority, aka Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, or also known as BIPOC, as well as other individuals, groups, populations, or cultures that continue to show up for the anti-racist communities and practices for all of us to benefit here in Atlanta and beyond. And we also want to pay respect, gratitude, and support to all humankind and living beings in the intersecting and overlapping social identities and factors such as gender, identity, caste, sexual orientation, race, class, religion, disability, physical appearance, and height. And this grounding and acknowledgement was written by our City of Atlanta Urban Ag Director, J. Olu Bayowu. And we would be remiss if we did not mention a quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., "No one is free until we are all free." I'd like to also get into just some general introductions for our Urban Ag and Food Systems team here at the City of Atlanta, also known as AgLanta, AGLANTA. We are real accessible people, we like to say, so you can reach out to us. You're not going to be speaking to a voicemail or automated AI or anything like that. And everyone's names are here, and we can also share with you our contact information as well. But I would like to kick it on over to our UGA Extension representative for your presentation today. So I'm going to stop sharing and boom, stop sharing. And Gabrielle, feel free.
Thank you, Justin. Okay, let me do this here. All right, y'all can see? Okay, cool. Thank you all so much for being here. Let me pin myself here. Okay. I so appreciate everyone coming. I am an entomologist by training, so this is probably my absolute favorite topic to talk about. But I do think it will be useful for everyone who's a gardener or farmer or is just interested in the world around us. So I want to give a huge thank you to the whole AgLanta team, including Justin and Yesenia, who helped me put this together and bring it to you all. And we have our other agriculture and natural resources agent, James Heron, here. He's going to be facilitating the chat. So if you have any questions throughout the talk, feel free to pop them in the chat and we'll address them at the end. So my name is Gabrielle Latorra. I forgot that part. I'm the Agriculture and Natural Resources Agent for UGA Extension in Fulton County. And if you're not familiar with Extension, we're kind of an outpost of the University of Georgia in every county in Georgia. And our job is to bring all that information from the university to the residents in our county and people who work in the county. So let's get into it. Before we really start, I want to post a poll question. So Justin, if you would help me out. Oh, I think this is not the right one. I want to know how many insect species you think have been described on Earth so far. So Justin, do you have that question, the one about insect species numbers? There it is. So this is the number of insect species that scientists have described so far on Earth. So pop your answer in there and we will reveal the true answer shortly. Of course, there are many more insect species that we don't know about, but this is how many we have found so far and described. Okay, I'll give it one more second or two. All right, let's see what y'all got. Okay, we got sort of 50-50 between 1 million and 2 million, so let's get into it. All right, we have about 1 million known insect species that we have described so far. Compare that to about 4,500 species of mammals that we've described on Earth. So kind of crazy how diverse the insect world is, and the absolute magnitude and breadth of diversity in the insect world. In terms of individual insects, we have about 200 million individual bugs for every human person on Earth. So not only is there huge diversity in terms of species, but there's actual massive volume of insects on Earth. Of our different groups, we'll get into different insect orders in a little bit. Beetles, which are in order Coleoptera, are the most speciose or diverse group of insects that we know of, with about 400,000 species. And this is actually more species than species of plants that have been described. So there are more species of beetles, not of all bugs, just of beetles, than of all plants that we know of, which is just wild to me. So when we are describing living things, we use a system that was developed by Carl Linnaeus. And the way that this works is we put living things into different buckets based on how similar they are, both morphologically, that's like what they look like, and genetically. And so our biggest buckets are going to be at this kingdom level. I think we have like 5 or 6 kingdoms. I can't remember the exact number, but within each of those kingdoms, we have many smaller buckets, which are our phyla. And then within each of these phyla, there are many smaller buckets, which are class, and so on. And so through these levels, these filters, we get more and more specific groups of living things. So when we're talking about insects, insects are in the kingdom Animalia. So they are animals. If you call yourself an animal lover, then you love insects. And within the kingdom Animalia, insects are within the phylum Arthropoda. So this group includes all arthropods, so everything with an exoskeleton. Within phylum Arthropoda, insects are within the class Insecta. So you can see this class level here. And this is really the level where we say this living thing is an insect. And at this class level, all insects have certain things in common. So under that class Insecta, we have order. We have 26 orders of insects. I'm not going to talk about nearly that many. I'm just going to go over the most common. And so these are some of the more common orders of insects. So we've got beetles, bees, wasps, and ants, butterflies and moths, flies, and true bugs. And we're going to go into all of these later. So another way to think about this is in terms of an evolutionary family tree, basically. So the way that this family tree works is the older branches developed farther back in evolutionary time. And so something like silverfish, which are in the order Thysanura, developed farther back in time than something like beetles or flies. And so this is a good schematic to show what are the more evolved or newer orders of insects, which would be our ants, bees, and wasps, our butterflies and moths, and our flies, compared to some of the older groups of insects. So when we're talking about the insect body, all insects have 3 body segments. So we've got the head. This is sort of the feeding and sensory locus for the body. So our mouth parts are going to be on the head, and things like antennae and maxillary palps, which can help the insect taste food, are all located on the head, and the eyes, of course. Our second body segment is the thorax, and the main function of the thorax is locomotion. So all of our wings are located on the thorax, and all 6 legs are also sort of come out of the thorax. And from this diagram, it kind of looks like there's some legs that are coming out of the abdomen, but I promise you, if you were to flip this bug over, you would see that all 6 legs arise from the thorax. So the third body segment is the abdomen, and this is where in an adult insect, the reproductive organs are going to be there, as well as most of the digestive system. Adult insects usually have 4 wings. Flies are kind of unique because they only have 2 wings, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. The hind wings are modified to help them balance while they're flying. So if you see an insect with wings, it is an adult insect. No immature insects have wings, but flies have 2 wings, and some insect species have evolved not to have wings because they don't need them. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. All insects have 6 legs. That's important when you're looking at something like a spider or a mite or something that's related to insects but is not technically in class Insecta. So mites and spiders are arachnids, they have 8 legs. So insects always have 6 legs, and they all have an exoskeleton, which is important when we think about insect development because like us, we have an endoskeleton. Our skeleton is inside of our body, so it can grow larger gradually. But insect bodies are not like that. Because they have this exoskeleton, they have to undergo these molting events in order to change the way their body looks or to get bigger. So we'll talk about this later too, how this life stage development works, but it's helpful to think about they're constricted by their exoskeleton. And so when we think about these molting events, this brings us to a central concept in entomology, which is metamorphosis. And this is how insects change and develop into adults. Oops, I went too far. So we've got 2 big categories of metamorphosis. We've got incomplete or gradual and complete. And insects don't decide which one of these they want to do. It's a characteristic of their order, pretty much. So in incomplete or gradual, this is the older evolutionarily, this is an older system. And so the egg hatches into a nymph. The immature insects that exhibit incomplete or gradual metamorphosis, we call them nymphs. And typically the immatures, they look like little adults. So they may not look exactly like the adult, but you can kind of see it if you squint. And at each molt, at each instar, they get more and more adult-like until they have their final molt into an adult. They have wings at this time. Remember, only adult insects have wings. And so at each molt, they're getting larger and they're getting more and more adult-like in this sort of gradual transformation. So compare that with complete metamorphosis, where there's this dramatic transformation at each life stage. So just like in incomplete, they start off as eggs, but when they hatch into a larva. And typically a larva looks like a worm or like a little squishy guy. And so they'll go through a couple larval molts where they get bigger and bigger. And then they have this special stage called the pupa. And this is sort of a resting stage where there's this dramatic transformation that happens inside and they emerge as an adult. And so insects with complete metamorphosis look completely different as adults than they do when they're larvae. And there is an evolutionary reason for this. Typically, the larvae and the adults might have different habitats. They might have different mouth parts, so they're feeding on different food sources. And because of that, they're not going to be competing for resources, for the same species at different life stages. Whereas for something like a grasshopper, where they look like a tiny adult as an immature, they have the same mouth parts, they're going to be feeding on the same food sources as the adult. And so competition is going to happen. So we see complete metamorphosis evolving later on this evolutionary family tree. So our older orders, our silverfish, our dragonflies, roaches and termites and true bugs all exhibit this gradual metamorphosis. And there was some event at some point in time that I don't know where complete metamorphosis evolved. And so all of the orders that we see that evolved later than this event exhibit complete metamorphosis. And so this is important because when you're out in your garden or on your farm, you want to be identifying your insects before you take any sort of management action or just for fun. And so it's helpful to know which groups of insects have which types of metamorphosis so you know what you're looking at. So when you see something like a zebra swallowtail caterpillar, you can say, okay, that sort of looks worm-like. That's probably a larva for something. So this is a zebra swallowtail. You can see the caterpillar stage, which is the larval stage of butterflies and moths. It pupates. Butterflies, they get a special name for their pupa, which is a chrysalis. And then it emerges completely different. So it undergoes this dramatic transformation. Beetles are the same way. This is the emerald ash borer, which is an invasive beetle pest of ash trees. It's actually been decimating ash populations in North America. But this is what the larva looks like. Like, that doesn't look like what you think of a beetle. It undergoes this pupal stage, and then it emerges as this beautiful jewel beetle adult. So something like dragonflies, they have incomplete metamorphosis. And so I need you to use your imagination a little bit, but this is the immature dragonfly, and dragonflies and damselflies are aquatic as at their nymphal stages. So this little guy lives underwater, and I mean, it takes a little imagining, but the head looks really similar to the adult. The legs look the same. If you were to just stretch the abdomen out, it's pretty similar. Then you pop some wings on it and you've got the adult dragonfly. And the same is true of our true bugs, including our stink bugs. So here are some nymphal stages of stink bugs. And, this looks like a stink bug, but smaller. There are some changes to the body and the coloration. And you can see this last molt right before the adult has these little wing pads. So it's about to develop wings as the adult. Mouth parts are also super important when we're thinking about insects. And from an application standpoint, we need to know the different types of mouth parts that insects have so we know what kind of damage they can cause or are causing to our landscape. So a lot of insects have what we call chewing mouth parts. So like beetles have these big mandibles that they use to actually chew plant material or other insects if they are predators. Some insects have siphoning mouth parts like butterflies and moths, and that means that their mouth is like a straw. So they can only consume liquids. So if you see any sort of damage, it can't possibly be a butterfly or a moth because they only have a straw as mouth part. We've got chewing lapping mouth parts on bees. That's most commonly seen on bees. So they've got sort of smaller mandibles and like a tongue that they can use to drink nectar. Piercing sucking is super, super, super important because this is what our true bugs have, which includes most of our most important landscape and vegetable food crop type pests. So that's going to be stuff like cicadas, stink bugs, aphids, whiteflies. We'll talk about them later. But in terms of this piercing sucking mouth part, their mouth part is shaped like a needle. So they actually use that needle to pierce either leaf material or prey insects and suck out the cell contents or whatever's inside the insect body. So if you see damage and it's like clearly something's been chewing on the leaves, it can't possibly be an insect that has piercing sucking mouth parts. What you see with something like a cicada or a true bug is you see stippling almost, where they actually have punctured whatever that fruit or plant material is and sucked out the cell contents. Houseflies and other flies have sponging mouth parts. So they actually have like a sponge at the end of their mouth, and they exude saliva through the sponge, and the enzymes in the saliva start to break down. I can see Justin is loving this. It starts to break down whatever's on the surface, and then they can kind of sponge up those nutrients. And then we've got rasping sucking. This is really only seen in thrips for the most part. So I'm not going to go into it super much, but it's very similar to piercing sucking mouth parts. So here's some cool pictures. We've got our chewing, lapping mouth parts on our honeybee. So you can see its tongue here. This is our siphoning mouth parts on a butterfly. So it's actually 2 straws that they stick together and then they roll it up when they're not using it to keep it protected. This is a green stink bug, and so you can see its needle-like mouth part sort of held on the underside of the body. And a lot of the true bugs have a special structure on their belly that's sort of a groove where they can lay this needle down in the groove so it doesn't get damaged when they're not using it. So insects like caterpillars and beetles have chewing mouth parts. You can see their big mandibles there used for either chewing up leaf material or other insects. And then, of course, our beloved housefly sponging up whatever it can find. So now I'm going to get into some of our more common insect orders, and this is not going to be comprehensive. There are so many different types of insects out there that I'm only going to cover a handful of orders, which are the most common, but I just want to familiarize you with some of the characteristics of these different groups so you can more easily say, oh, I know that that's a true bug, or I know that that's a beetle, and then you can sort of work to get more specific to get an identification later. So true bugs are super, super common in the garden. They're in the order Hemiptera, which means half wing. And they're called that because half of the forewing is sort of hardened and leathery, and the end that's farther away from their body is membranous. So you can see it better. These are both harlequin bug pictures, but you can see it better in this photo. So half of the front wing is hardened and the back half is membranous. That's where this the order name comes from. And because of this half and half deal, when they hold their wings back, they get this almost X on the back. Or you can see this upside down triangle. This is a scale that's called the scutellum. This is characteristic of true bugs. So you're not really going to see this on any other insects. So either look for this X-like shape, where's my mouse? X shape on the back of the insect, or the upside down triangle, the scutellum, and you're looking at a true bug. Other insects in the order Hemiptera will hold their wings like a tent over the back of their body, and we'll see some pictures of that in a minute. All true bugs have incomplete metamorphosis. So like we saw that picture of the different stages of the stink bug a minute ago. So they're gradually getting more and more adult-like at each of their molts. So they don't undergo this big transformative process. All true bugs have piercing, sucky mouth parts. I know I'm really beating down on this mouth part thing, but this is really important. So you know when you're looking at some damage on your plant, what could have possibly caused this. And they tend to have their eyes like on the side of their head, but there is some variation among the group. So we've got two big sort of subgroups, and I don't need you to memorize the names. I just want you to recognize that there are these two big categories within our true bugs. So we've got suborder Heteroptera. These are things like stink bugs, assassin bugs, shield bugs. Leaf-footed bugs are super, super common. They've got these like paddles on their hind wings, or I'm sorry, on their hind legs. We've got squash bugs, plant bugs, bed bugs are true bugs. So they're not feeding on plant material. They are blood feeders, which we know. And actually, bed bugs have evolved not to have wings as adults. So this is an adult. You can see it doesn't have any wings because it doesn't need it. It's just crawling around. Things like water bugs. And if anyone's ever seen a wheel bug, they are awesome. They're pretty big, and you can see its needle-like mouth part here, which it actually uses to pierce other insects. So don't pick that guy up if you can help it. Our other big group are in the suborders Occanorhyncha and Sternarhyncha, and these are things like aphids. Oh, I have some more photos. Aphids, whiteflies, scales, cicadas, leafhoppers, and spittle bugs. So these are some of the guys that will hold their wings like a tent over their body. So you can see like this whitefly and the cicadas hold their wings sort of differently than our heteropterans. And scale insects are pretty cool. Like you wouldn't think that this is an insect, but it is. They create this armor on their back, and actually they also have piercing, sucky mouth parts. So they are sucking up plant material underneath of that armor. And this is the group that are some of our worst garden pests and far farm pests as well. You know, a lot of these guys, aphids, whiteflies, and scales particularly can also transmit viruses. So we get a lot of plant disease vectors in this group as well. So here's some cool pictures of the adult true bugs and their immature stages. So squash bugs are a big crop pest. You can see the adult, there's its upside down triangle scutellum or the X on the back. And these are what their eggs look like. They're kind of this oblong bronze color. These are the nymphs. So they don't look exactly the same, but you can see the resemblance. Box elder bugs are also really common. They have bright red nymphs. And here you can see an older nymph where it's got its little wing pads. So it's probably just at the stage right before it molts into an adult. And then leaf-footed bugs, as I said, are super, super common. And I just started this job last year, but I've already gotten at least 5 questions with photos of the immature leaf-footed bugs saying, what is this kooky ant that's all over my plants? I'm here to tell you it is not an ant. It is an immature leaf-footed bug, and you can actually see its little leaves starting to develop on the hind legs if you look really close. The next order I want to talk about is Lepidoptera. These are moths and butterflies. They undergo complete metamorphosis, and we can sort of deduce that based on the larval stage, which is a caterpillar. So this doesn't really look anything like a butterfly. The larvae, the caterpillars, have chewing mouth parts, and that's why some of them are our worst crop pests as well. Even the ones we do like monarchs, are still chewing insects. You know, we put out milkweed plants for them to feed on. So once they undergo their pupation, the adults have a different type of mouth part, like, you know, what I talked about earlier with the siphoning mouth parts. So moths and butterflies typically drink nectar, or you will often see them puddling. This is a behavior where we see a big group of butterflies hanging out next to a puddle or some water that's on a rock. And so they can drink up dissolved minerals and nutrients that are in the water that's resting somewhere. Some species of moths and butterflies don't even have mouth parts. They have evolved to lose them, basically. They just decided, I guess, that all they want to do as adults is mate and lay eggs, and that's it. They don't need to feed. So it's kind of interesting. They are pollinators. Even the ones we don't like, which are some of the moths, are pollinating because they're moving from flower to flower, drinking nectar and moving pollen. And as we know, that's how flowering plants reproduce, although these can be some of our worst pests. So I want to give a shout out to some common caterpillars. We've got our pickle worms. If anybody grows squash or cucurbits, you know the pickle worm well. Tomato hornworms. They're called hornworms because they've got this little horn, and they can really decimate some tomato plants quickly. You really have to be on the lookout for them early. Luckily, they have some cool natural enemies, which we'll talk about later. Cabbage loopers are going to be really common, feeding on our not cucurbits, you know, our cabbages and our other brassica crops. And then we've got some guys that you don't want to touch. A lot of caterpillars will have hairs that can cause an allergic reaction and can even send you to the hospital. So something like a flannel moth, saddleback caterpillars, and tussock moths, you do not want to touch them. I have a rule that I don't touch any hairy caterpillars just because I don't want to take the risk. But definitely these 3, no touchy. All right, our next order is Hymenoptera. These are bees, wasps, and ants. So yes, bees, wasps, and ants are all related. They all exhibit complete metamorphosis. So they do have that larva that looks kind of worm-like. The thing is with these guys is you don't often see the larva because they're either in the hive, in nesting structures, they're in the hole somewhere where the female is taking care of them. So we don't often see them like we do with caterpillars or with beetle grubs or some other types of insects. But they do have a larval stage. And bees, wasps, and ants are really interesting because some of them exhibit really complex social organization. This is really in a small number of species compared with all the species, but we see that with honeybees, to a lesser extent with bumblebees, Some of our wasp pests like bald-faced hornets, yellow jackets, paper wasps all live in these big family groups where certain individuals look different because they have a specific job to do. And typically we have one or a few queens that are responsible for all the reproduction. The vast majority of bees and wasps are not in this social kind of structure. They're what we call solitary. So they actually just live independently. The males and the females just do their own thing. They might happen to meet and mate, and then the female will go create some sort of nesting structure. So she might dig a hole in the ground. She might take some mud and build a little pot basically to lay her eggs in. What else we see with carpenter bees? They will actually like dig a hole in some wood, so that becomes their nest. They don't live in a big hive. It's just one or a few insects near each other. And that female will tend to only one or a few larvae per season. So typically our solitary insects, our solitary bees and wasps are not aggressive because it's just that one female taking care of her one or a few larvae that season. She's not going to risk attacking you because she has to feed and care for that larva until it's ready to pupate. So we do see some aggression in the social species because they've got this huge family group that they need to protect. And so they're willing to protect it at all costs. That's where all the larvae for their entire family group are. That's where all the adults are. So you can see some aggression in the more social species. But like I said, the vast majority of hymenopterans are going to be solitary and they're non-aggressive. These are some of our most important predators and pollinators. So we all know honeybees. There are a ton of other solitary native bees that are really important pollinators, not only for our crops, but also for native plants. So they can really keep native ecosystems intact through pollination services. And things like ants and wasps are amazing predators. So wasps tend to eat caterpillar pests primarily. So they will grab a whole caterpillar, fly away with it, and take it to their nest to feed to the larvae. Some species are parasitic. They're what we call parasitoids, which is so cool. They will actually lay their eggs in or on another insect, the host, and then their larvae, so the wasp larva, will feed on that host insect until it's ready to pupate, and the host insect dies in the process. So this is a great way for us to naturally control some of our pest insects by promoting these parasitoids. Little fun fact, only females can sting. The stinger is a modified ovipositor, which is the organ that they use to lay their eggs. And so if you can get to know what the males look like versus what the females look like, you really only have to worry about females. Okay, so I did touch on parasitoids a little bit. We have two different types of parasitoid wasps that target our tomato hornworms. So if you've ever seen this, which I'm sure many of you have seen this, this is from a wasp species called Cotesia congregata. And with a lot of our parasitoid wasps and other parasitoids, a lot of flies are parasitoids as well, they have a really specific relationship with the host, with one host species. So they're not going to be a threat to any other insects or to us. Cotesia congregata is only looking for tomato hornworms, and that's it. So she's going to lay her eggs inside the body of this caterpillar. The larvae hatch inside the caterpillar and start feeding on its body. And when they have reached the point where they want to pupate, they emerge and they spin this little cocoon. So each one of these is a Cotesia pupa. When they've completed this transformation, they pop the tops off and they fly away. So if you see a caterpillar that has this going on, just leave it be. It's not going to last. The caterpillar really doesn't have that much time left, unfortunately, but you'll have what, like 50 wasps in the environment that are going to take care of the other tomato hornworms in your environment. So unfortunately for tomato hornworms, they also have an egg parasitoid. So these are trichogramma wasps. And they actually do the same thing, but on the tomato hornworm's egg. So this female is laying her egg inside of the hornworm's egg. It will feed in there, and then this egg will never hatch into a tomato hornworm. So we've got another parasitoid wasp that's eyeing this aphid. So you can see how small some of them are. This is an ichneummonid wasp. So this female is using her super, super long ovipositor to drill into this bark of a tree where she's going to lay her egg inside of a beetle larva that's feeding inside of the tree. So she's somehow able to sense where the beetle larvae are, and she's going to parasitize them from outside. And then, of course, we've got some predators. So this specid wasp is picking up a caterpillar to probably take back to her nest to feed to her larvae. And, you know, doing all of this takes a lot of energy. So these wasps are going to stop off at flowers to get a quick snack. So they're going to drink some nectar, which is super high in carbohydrates. You know, it's real sugary. And they're going to eat some pollen, which is super high in protein. So I like to think of flowers as like Red Bull for wasps. So they're just going to grab a quick snack before they can go out and continue taking care of some of our pest insects. So, you know, when they're moving from flower to flower, they unwittingly become pollinators as well. So we can think of them as really valuable pollinators too. Okay, flies. I got to tell you guys, I am very, very stoked on flies. They are some of the coolest insects out there. And I know some of them are very annoying, but they are really interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, they only have 2 wings. And like you can see on this crane fly, the hind wings have evolved into this structure that we call halteres. And they act kind of like a gyroscope. I really encourage everybody to go on YouTube at some point and look up like fly halteres, because people have done some experiments where they cut them off and see what the fly does. And it turns out they can't fly without them. They spin in air, and that helps the insect balance and know where it is in space. So it's pretty cool. They're amazing flyers because of this specialized organ. They do have complete metamorphosis. So the larval form of flies we know as maggots affectionately. They have very, very diverse lifestyles and feeding habits. So like we talked about earlier, some have a spongy mouth part, some are predators. Mosquitoes famously have piercing, sucking mouth parts because they are blood feeders. They're also notable disease vectors. Some are parasitoids, like the wasps that we were just talking about. So these flies have laid their eggs on the outside of Japanese beetles. The fly eggs will hatch, bore into the beetle, and feed inside of the beetle. So they're killing some of the Japanese beetles for us, which is nice. Some flies do exhibit what we call biomimicry. So they actually have evolved to look like bees and wasps. So up here we can see this hoverfly, also known as flower flies or syrphid flies, has this like black and yellow warning coloration like a bee or a wasp. But we have some specific characteristics. So y'all pay attention. I'm going to quiz you in a minute. Okay, so we know flies only have 2 wings. They often hold them outwards at this 45-degree angle, kind of like an airplane. You can see the halteres here. These are the modified hind wings, although you're probably not going to be close enough to see these normally. But flies also have these big flat eyes. Like I call them pancake eyes because they're just like right on top of the head. Some of them take up almost the entire head. And some of them meet on top of the head. So they've got these big flat eyes. And then they have 2 short little stubby bristle-like antennae that often arise right from the middle of the head in between the eyes. So these are some characteristics to look for when you're talking about flies. So I have a little quiz for you. We're going to go through some of these and I want you to tell me whether this is a bee, a wasp, or a fly. And Justin, I think, has some poll questions. So take a look at this bug and let me know if you think this is a bee, a wasp, or a fly based on some of the characteristics that we talked about. I love doing these questions during our Master Gardener trainings. I know we have one Master Gardener in the meeting, but I just like to stump people. Okay, we'll give it one more second here. All right, y'all pretty much nailed it. This is a wasp. This is a paper wasp. So wasps tend to have a really narrow waist. It's not really a waist, but this junction between the abdomen and the thorax tends to be very narrow. And they have these long thread-like antennae. They don't have those two stubby little antennae like flies. You can't really tell that they have 4 wings because a lot of wasps and bees will actually hook their front wing and their hind wing together for protection. But sometimes you can kind of tell that there are 4 wings versus 2, like we see in flies. They also don't have these big flat eyes. You know, they're kind of more off to the side. Okay, let's do another one. Bee, wasp, or fly? What do y'all think about this one? I see these a lot in my garden, so now you will know what it is. All right, let's go ahead and end it. I think most of y'all pretty much got this. This is a fly. This is another hover or syrphid fly. And you can't see the whole tiers here, but you really can see these sort of wings held out like an airplane. There's only 2 wings, but really it's the eyes that I'm looking at. These big pancake eyes and these 2 stubby little antennae right in the middle. So flies do this biomimicry so that other insects don't mess with them. And as you can see, it does work because we think, you know, oh, that's a bee or a wasp. Okay, let's do another one. Bee, wasp, or fly? Justin, if you will pop the poll up for us. This is one of my favorites. Okay, I'm not seeing the poll. Am I missing it? All right, no biggie. This is a bee. So this is a leafcutter bee. They're very small. They're in the family Megachilidae. And if you look really, really close, you can see that they have 4 wings. You can almost see this like shadow of a hind wing here. But really, you know, we see these long thread-like antennae and the eyes are on the side of the head. So we don't see these big flat eyes like we do with flies. So these leafcutter bees are really cool. They actually use their chewing mouth parts to chew out perfect semicircles from around the margins of leaves. And the females take that leaf material back to their nest and they line their nest with it for the larvae. So they're often this like whitish, yellowish color, very small. So you will see these a lot in your gardens. Okay, I just have 2 more. What do you think about this one? Bee, wasp, or fly? We don't have to do a poll. We can just give it a minute. So let me know what you think here. Look for some of our identifying characteristics. All right, I'm gonna do a big reveal. This is a fly. This is not a bumblebee. And I thought this one was especially tricky because it's doing a really good job of mimicking a bumblebee. But as you can see, it's got these huge flat eyes. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Justin. And it's got these 2 stubby little antennae. And if you were to really look close, it's only got 2 wings, which is characteristic of a fly. Okay, last one. Bee, wasp, or fly? Go ahead and put your answer in the poll. What do you think about this one? And I know we didn't really talk about the differences between flies and wasps, but I can go over that in a sec. All right, I think most people have gotten their answers in. Some people are changing their answers. All right, this is a bee. This is a honeybee. Everyone should know their honeybees. So bees are typically really hairy. Wasps tend to not be very hairy. You can think of them as like female superhero, like in a cat suit is what wasps tend to look like. But we can tell this is a bee because we can see a little shadow of a hind wing here. So we can see that they have 4 wings, but they don't have these big flat eyes. Their eyes are off to the side and they've got these long, skinny, graceful antennae. So this is our favorite, the honeybee. All right, I'm gonna just speed it up here so we can end on time. Beetles are amazing. As I mentioned earlier, they are the most speciose group of insects that we know of, and they're in the order Coleoptera, which means sheath wing. So their front wings have evolved into these hardened structures we call elytra, and that's to protect their hind wings, which are really membranous. So if you've ever seen a ladybug, which is also called a lady beetle, fly away, they move these elytra out of the way and they unfold the membranous hind wings and kind of clunkily fly away. And they have these hardened elytra to protect these wings because a lot of beetles will be crawling under logs and under leaf litter. They might be tunneling inside of a tree or wherever. They are just awesome. So they need to protect those membranous wings. They do have complete metamorphosis. So we have a larval stage. This is a mealworm. Many of you may have fed mealworms to like a pet lizard or something, but that doesn't look like a beetle. So that gives us sort of an indication that they have complete metamorphosis. And just as a tip, beetle larvae are also known as grubs. So when we think about like white grubs or Japanese beetle larvae, so that's kind of their nickname. Beetles have chewing mouth parts, so that makes them both pests if they're chewing on leaf material or predators if they're chewing on other insects like this tiger beetle is doing with a caterpillar. And they're really, really important decomposers. If you think about dung beetles are decomposing dung, we've got a lot of beetles that are chewing up woody material, breaking down old logs and old leaf material. So I think it's helpful to thank our decomposers because without them, we would have all types of dead plant material and, poop and all types of stuff just building up around us. So thank you to our decomposers. And yes, fireflies or lightning bugs are beetles. All right, I'm just going to gloss over grasshoppers, crickets, and katydids, which are in the order Orthoptera. They have this front leathery wing, which similar to the beetles, this protects their hind wing that they really use for flying. Katydids are these green guys that look like leaves, by the way, and you can often hear them calling in the trees at night. So a lot of people think that those are cicadas, but they're actually katydids. They have chewing mouth parts. So again, they're mostly pests feeding on plant material like our mole crickets, our turfgrass pests. Lubber grasshoppers, when I lived in Florida, are like everywhere and they're huge. But katydids are predators. So like some of our other chewing insects, they are both pests and predators. And they're a major food source for animals just because they're so numerous and they're so big. And I assume that they're crunchy and delicious. But often I get people ask me, what are blank group of insects even good for? And sometimes the catch-all answer is they're just food for other animals, including birds, which we love. So I think that's a valid reason to exist. Okay, those are the main groups of insects that you're going to see. Of course, there are many, 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 many other types of insects, but there are plenty of resources out there for you to identify insects. There's some great field guides. This one, the National Wildlife Federation field guide, is written by one of my mentors, Art Evans, who's an amazing coleopterist. So he's a beetle scientist. I love the Peterson guides. And this book, Garden Insects of North America, is absolutely incredible. It's amazing and it's not very expensive. So it has like almost every insect that you're going to see in your garden. Pest, predator, parasitoid, whatever, it's going to be in this book. So I highly, highly recommend this one. And it has amazing photos. A lot of the photos in this presentation were taken by this author, Whitney Cranshaw, and are in this book. Bugguide.net is a really cool site that's sort of crowd sourced. People upload their photos, and then there's a lot of amateur entomologists on there that are classifying them and identifying them and all types of stuff. So that's a really cool website. There are dichotomous keys, although you need to know some in more insect anatomy that I always have to look up those words. But your extension agent is here to help. So if you're a Fulton County resident or you work in Fulton County, feel free to send me your bug pictures. I would love to see them. If you live in another county, find out who your extension agent is and you can send them photos and they will gladly help you identify them. Or if they can't, they will email me and I will help. Just a quick plug for some of our programs coming up. Next Tuesday at this same time block, we have an IPM Basics webinar. So we're going to cover the basic concepts of integrated pest management, which is kind of a holistic, multi-pronged approach to managing pests either on your farm, in your garden, or in your landscape. And we're going to talk about some of that. So that's going to be virtual next Tuesday, 7 to 8 p.m. And then on Sunday, June 11th, we have an in-person insect scouting workshop. This is limited to commercial growers or producers and community garden leaders only, just because of space restrictions. And we're really going to target some of these insect scouting skills to sort of a commercial system. So feel free to scan these QR codes. We'd like you to register for both of these programs, but we would be more than happy to have you. They're both free. I just love talking about bugs. So I'll leave this up for one more second here, but of course, email me and I can hook you up. And that's really all I got. I want to thank all of you so much for being here with me and hearing me blab on and on about insects, but please feel free to email me anytime. This is the number to our North Fulton office. That's where I'm stationed. But I will tell you, email is a better way to contact me. I will get back to you faster. So with that, thank you so much. And I would love to hear if we have any questions.
Thanks, Gabrielle. We do have one. Do
Okay.
insects exhibiting incomplete metamorphosis, is their breeding or hatching more seasonal given the competition between adults and nymphs?
That's a good question. Actually, there's a seasonality to a lot of insect life cycles, but we actually see that seasonality more in insects with complete metamorphosis, where it just depends how many generations are going to occur per year per insect species. But the incomplete metamorphosis guys tend to be just like they keep reproducing throughout the year, where complete metamorphosis, those insects have like a specific time period. That's a broad generalization, but for any insect that you encounter in the landscape you want to know more about, you're going to have to look up what that species is or what that group is to really find out what the seasonality or the phenology of that insect species is. It really just depends. But that's a good question. I like where your head's at. Anybody else have any questions about bugs?
You can type them into the chat, and we can read that if you do have any others. Justin is also putting links to the next week's webinar, so you can see that in the chat.
And I didn't talk about mantids. Mantids have incomplete metamorphosis. So if you've ever seen like a nest of mantids that just hatched, they look like tiny miniature praying mantises, which is amazing. So cool to see. So if you ever see an insect that looks like a miniature version of the adult, you know that it's a group with incomplete metamorphosis.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Another question's coming in.
How helpful is it to buy insects in the store, or if you could buy them online?
Oh, this is a great question. I'm so glad you asked this, and I probably will talk more about it in the IPM webinar, because this is really common. People will buy natural enemies, so our predators and parasitoids that are produced commercially, and then they'll release them in the landscape. It can be effective depending on the climate and the environment and how much prey is there for them or how many host insects. Generally, I tend to encourage people to, rather than buying commercially produced natural enemies, to promote them in their landscape. So to support natural enemies that are already existing in the landscape using resources. So we want to give them food, whether that is flowering plants to give them that bug Red Bull, like I talked about earlier, or to make sure that there's enough prey for them to eat. That's sort of another reason not to completely nuke our landscapes, because we want to leave some prey insects to support our natural enemies that need to eat as well. So there's a lot of strategies for promoting native natural enemies. And often that's a more sustainable direction, partly because the commercially produced ones, they grew up in a lab under laboratory conditions. So when you release them in the environment, a lot of them are just going to die straight out because they're not habituated to, what our climate is like here in Georgia. The other thing is usually there's just not enough prey in the landscape to support however many you're releasing. So often you'll buy like 200 ladybugs. You release them, they need a lot of prey to support 200 ladybugs. So most of them are going to disperse. They're going to fly away from your landscape and you kind of just flushed your money down the toilet. So in general, I try to encourage people to provide food, shelter, and water to support native natural enemies that are already in the environment. If anyone has any lingering questions, please feel free to email me. I get a lot of questions I can't answer, so I'm really happy when I get some bug-related questions because I'm like, yes, I know something. So I'm here to help you as a resource. If you have any questions, and check out those resources that I mentioned as well if you feel interested in the topic. But thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to chat about my favorite subjects.
Awesome, awesome. And thank you so much, Gabrielle, for such a riveting discussion. I was thoroughly intrigued and grossed out and
I
learned
saw
so
you
much.
making some faces.
Yeah, it was the sponge mouth on the fly. I just started thinking about any time a fly lands on my food. But
That's what's happening. Exactly.
yeah, but awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you everyone else in the audience for your participation. And please take Gabrielle's information down here and feel free to ask any questions moving forward. As she mentioned, we do have a follow-up integrated pest management webinar next Tuesday. And then also the following Sunday, there is an in-person insect scouting workshop, which we're primarily promoting for farmers, gardeners, community gardeners, just due to space capacity. But also, I want to let everyone know of another opportunity from our friends at Georgia Organics. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly. Boom, present. Uh-oh. That didn't work. Okay, so there is on June 27th, a Georgia Organics Farmer Field Day, where they're going to be going over integrated pest management and organic cropping systems at Crystal Organics Farm in New Bern, Georgia. So the day will include an in-depth walkthrough of the farm, Crystal Organics, and their UGA Extension Specialist, Dr. Jason Schmidt, and Dr. Babesh Dutta, and also a representative of Seven Springs Farm Supply will be there to answer any questions. And it'll be an amazing in-person event. They also have lunch catered as well. You can head over to Georgia Organics webpage or Instagram social media page for details on that. There's also an Eventbrite link that I will go ahead and share in our, actually, let me put this whole thing in our chat here for anyone who wants to copy and paste. Okay, functionality is a little different. Boom, putting that here. for anyone who wants to copy and paste, but plenty of resources available within this conversation of entomology and integrated pest management. And we look forward to fostering more education and educational efforts between everyone. So thank you all so much for joining. There will be a survey prompted by Zoom after this webinar ends. Please fill out that survey. That lets us know that this is beneficial information and we can bring it back, with more webinars in the future. So thank you so much again for joining. We look forward to having you all in our next week's Integrated Pest Management workshop or webinar, and you all have a great night. Thank you all.